My colleagues, the Committee of the Whole is called to order. We will now proceed to the amendment. It's listed as SB 55 TMT L 24 to 27, page 22. And this is Speaker Terlai's amendment. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is to the section that says appropriations to UOG for scholarships and training programs. So this is in almost every budget. I just wanted to make some changes this year based on our discussions with UOG at their budget hearings and in prior years as well. So, you know, years ago, of course, or over the years, the legislature has adopted different scholarship programs that they are willing to fund, different types of ways to bring trained people into certain professions. And then over the years, they amended those. And what we have left right now is what I'm trying to reflect by these amendments. So my amendment is to change the list of, so we make an appropriation this year as well of $3 million for these scholarship programs and $250,000 for one particular program, which is the First Generation Trust Fund Initiative. It looks to me like they put these all in a pot and then they use them at their discretion, yes, among the different programs. So what I wanted to do was go back to, I researched the law and tried to make sure it was accurate and put in all of the programs that are recognized in statute as these are the programs that will be funded by the amount that we are appropriating. And all the other programs, I'm suggesting by the new subsection D, that UOG may allocate from the general fund appropriation of section 2 of this part of this chapter any additional sums toward any other types of scholarships or financial assistance programs that it deems necessary. So in other words, we're putting money in, but we're still keeping the priorities that we've set by law. And if they want or need to fund any other types of programs, which may be excellent, that they do it out of their allocation. And the reason I'm doing this, and of course I added a new subsection C that says UOG may submit a proposed realignment plan or recommendations to amend statutory student scholarships and financial assistance programs consistent with community, workforce, and economic recovery needs. So it may be that we need to readjust our priorities for scholarships, right? And so that's why I'm trying to give them an opportunity as well, that if they have recommendations and they want us to change these statutes, then let's look at it, formally. I guess it should say in there somewhere that they should submit it to the Guam Legislature. That's what it means. If I could add that as a technical amendment on C, that it would be submitted to the Guam Legislature. But so going back to the list, I'll just tell you my motivation in this is that when you look, we asked during the budget hearing for like an accounting of the scholarships that they had funded. And because we are recognizing needs even in government service that we are unable to fill. One of them that I'm sure all of you are familiar with is the teachers, right? Teaching, and we have made it, not us, years before us, legislatures before us made teaching scholarships a priority. They also made nursing scholarships a priority. They also recognized the need for professional technical scholarships for people to go to professional schools such as medical school. And we keep hearing from people that there is no funding available for them. And so when we got the accounting, it is quite evident. Sorry, I have a summary here. We're doing all right with the merit scholarships because these people are very informed and they, they go after their merit scholarships. So there are 218 merit scholarships. Those are given to the top students all around the island from high schools when they graduate. from 2020, and I think this year as well, 2021, 0 pro-tech scholarships. Those are the professional technical scholarships. None have been funded. There are 15 Doc Sanchez scholarships. Those are for masters in public administration or masters in business administration. So they're doing okay there. There are 29 nurse training scholarships. And we know that one cohort of the nurses is just about this many students. So if they're funding this many seniors, for example, they have no money. They have had no money for the sophomores and the freshmen, and any way to attract these students into these programs. And this is what we heard from the dean, and this is why, I began to look at these things, and this is what I want to fix. I want the money to go back into these nursing programs, especially, and under the nurse, it's called Health Professions Training Scholarships. They also take care of social work. And we heard when we had the CPS crisis, we cannot attract social workers to work at CPS, neither can we get them to become students in social work. I mean, we're luckily getting graduates because they have an excellent program up there, but we can use all of the graduates that we can get. We can use a lot more, in other words. So I think for social works, there were 3 scholarships. Sorry, that's wrong. Yes, no, that's correct. 3. 3 for fiscal year 2020. The Yamashita Teacher Corps for fiscal year 2020, 1. Yes, and so there are a lot of other programs that they have up there, which I don't want to criticize, right? But if you just look at them, I still don't believe that they should be prioritized perhaps over these, right? And if they should, then I think we need a more formal request for that from UOG, who's, hands on the ground, they can see, but also, because that way we can have a public hearing on it and we can determine the need for these in our community. We can confirm that this is really going to be how we recover from our economic downturn. We've all talked a lot about we need to put money into these types of programs so that we can retrain workers whose jobs may never come back, or retrain those workers whose, it may take a long time, so that we can get them into these areas that we continue to have super high needs for. So I hope that's a sufficient explanation, and I hope I can get your support in this. And if you'd like to see the numbers of where the scholarship money has gone, I have those available for you to review as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But you just wanted to make sure we do that technical, right, on letter C, after the word program, and submit it to the Guam Legislature, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, my colleagues, does any of my colleagues would like to speak to this amendment? Senator Torres, and then followed by Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just concerned at a time when our students are looking for any opportunity for aid, regardless of what the discipline is, that we allow the university to have that discretion in whether to award or not. And so I just, I have reservations about taking this kind of action right now at this point in the budget process. And is that not what, if the proffer of the amendment was so speak, I understand the prioritization, but that process in itself really is something that can be borne by the university to ascertain what they will or will not offer at any given time. So, is that a consideration for those, for example, that might find value in a ROTC program or a marine lab program or early high school admissions program, for example?
All right. Senator Nelson, do you have any comments or anything you would like to speak on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions for OFB, and then I'll. Steve, did UOG receive for FY21 and FY22? What was the appropriation for UOG?
geez. That's in reference to the scholarship, right?
No, just in general.
In
What
general?
was the
Oh,
overall
okay, in general.
appropriation for FY21 and
21.
FY22? Sometimes OFB gives us a tracker for what we budgeted in the previous years, so.
Are you talking about the total appropriation, both general fund and special funds?
Correct.
Okay. The total amount was 32 million, Senator.
For both years?
32.1.
For both years?
Yeah, no, for 21.
Okay, and 22 is, I'm sorry,
It's 30.9.
30.9, so just a couple $100,000 off.
You're correct.
And how much did UOG receive in any federal programs that was given to us as a result of the pandemic?
The most recent information we got, Senator, from UOG is they received 12.7 million on ARP money.
12.7?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I stand in support of this amendment. You know, it's very clear that UOG may allocate from general fund in that section D if they want to be able to fund additional scholarships. We just learned that, well, we didn't just learn, but we have been educated on $12.7 million extra in ARP funding. And just a little bit background information, Mr. Chair. You know, I have had a lot of students reach out to me and their family members, and they've inquired that some of them have been accepted to New York University Medical School programs, and some even to Ross University Medical School programs, but there's no ProTech scholarship available for them, Mr. Chair. And so I understand that there have been doctors in the past that have been able to avail to the ProTech. And because we are adding every single program that UOG wants to start an initiative on, the most needed areas, especially as we've seen in the pandemic, has greatly suffered from it. So those that would like to look for education opportunity in healthcare, I know we do the WICHE now, but come on, med school is like $300,000, $400,000, right? And so this is an opportunity to give our youth or anyone that is seeking higher education, especially in the healthcare program, to go out, and nurses also to get their nurse practitioners to go out and be able to get some kind of assistance from this scholarship. And for many years, this has been neglected. And you know, we are also focusing on the greater needs in these areas. So I just have one more question for fiscal year 22. What is the impact to these programs that we are crossing out? Are they receiving any assistance or any stipends from these programs, these scholarships? And will that impact their FY22? As we go into FY22, will that impact the money that they'll be receiving? So if we take away ROTC, is that going to impact their stipends? If we take away the Marine Lab Graduate Assistance Program, is that going to impact their stipend?
Senator, in terms of how much money UOG is going to have for these programs is basically on the appropriation that we're proposing in the bill. Whatever additional funding they may receive in federal assistance to what they already have to date, that we don't know unless they forward that and provide that information.
Okay, and then also to the sponsor of the amendment.
Thank you. Yes. So the goal of the amendment, of course, is not to impact any student who may be receiving any of these listed scholarships. It's really just to go back to the priorities that are listed by statute and recognize that those are what the statutes mandate. Those are why we're putting the funds in, first and foremost. Secondly, if you look at subsection D that's being proposed, it to take care of those who may, because of, our fiscal year doesn't perfectly align with their years, but hopefully they don't impact any of these students who are counting on these scholarships throughout their, educational career. It's just saying that these were scholarships distributed by the university at their discretion, and that they will be funded pursuant to subsection D, pursuant to their discretion as well, meaning from the allocation from the general funds that we are giving them for, to be used at their discretion. But the ones where we've recognized that we have a huge need in the government and in the private sector, such as doctors, as my colleague has described, shortage of doctors on Guam, shortage of nurses, shortage of teachers, drastic shortage of teachers, shortage of social works, that we haven't gone away from those priorities. Hopefully subsection D will take care of those who are currently under the other scholarships at the discretion of the university. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Nelson, do you have any other
No.
questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the sponsor for that explanation. It gives reassurance that we are also anticipating that UOG still has the opportunity and the flexibility and the authority to continue to fund these other projects that are not in accordance with the law. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does any other colleague would like to speak to the amendment? Senator Paris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in full support of this amendment. I think that, in many of the budget hearings that we've had, there was a lot of issues with successional planning. And, considering that this can definitely jumpstart or fill that need. I think also ProTech is such a huge, will be a huge boost to our economy, as well as the nursing program and teachers. I think these are things that have been chronically underfilled, and we really need to prioritize these specialties. Being that also UOG is starting up their engineering program, we can home grow our local talent to fill many of the needs in our community, as well as help to rebuild our economy. So I rise in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Does any other colleague would like to speak to the amendment? Senator Tello?
Sujus Masi, Mr. Chair. I was hoping this amendment actually would have additional funding set aside for this area. I mean, nothing more important than, rebuilding our economy by training and providing the necessary education needed for those to go into a certain field other than the tourism industry. As we've seen so far, what's happened to us today, it's time that we retrain our community in areas such as healthcare, technical education, and other areas that would help rebuild Guam to a different reliance and not so much on tourism. Mr. Chair, I've been an advocate for this area in providing more funding for scholarships. In fact, I introduced legislation that would put money into this area, yet to have a public hearing, but hopefully that will happen soon. But Mr. Chair, the reasoning for utilizing most of this money to these areas, of course, is to help provide this different area that's been most impacted by the pandemic. And there is a section here that I wanted to bring up earlier, that not a section, but a comment that I received some information from Mark Duarte at the University of Guam. He said he had to halt certain scholarships due to the lack of funding, especially in the field of social work, ProTech, and the Jesus Torres Professional and Technical, and it hasn't been paid out in 3 semesters. We're neglecting an area that we need to build. So because of that, Mr. Chair, I stand in full support of this amendment and thank the author and hope that our senators here today realize the importance of how we can, rebuild Guam and or actually retrain Guam into different fields other than tourism, as what happened to us during this pandemic, that we realized we have to go into another direction other than that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tyree. My colleagues, we're going to take a short recess. The clerk needs to meet with the author. There may be some technical corrections, and I don't want to, I want to make sure that you all know what they are and the amendment is clear. All right? We're going to recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. I recognize Madam Speaker.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for your patience. I'd like to make a motion to withdraw my prior amendment on lines 24 to 27, page 22, and lines 1 through 16, page 23. And there should be another amendment that's been uploaded with the title TMT L24-27 P22 and L1-16 P23 S3 Committee of the Whole. Same section, it's just we're changing sections D and E. If you could find that amendment, please. So my motion to withdraw the first amendment that we had been discussing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Are there any objections to the motion to withdraw the amendment? No objection. Motion passes. Madam Speaker, if you could speak to your...
Yes. So I'd like to, so this amendment is, as I previously discussed regarding the scholarships, just to make them in line with the statutory mandates and to put a new subsection C into this section of the bill that would say that UOG may submit to legislatura, it should be legislatura, a proposed realignment plan to amend statutory student scholarships and financial assistance programs consistent with community, workforce, and economic recovery needs. That would be C. D would say UOG may allocate from the general fund appropriation of section 2 of this part of this chapter any additional sums toward any other types of scholarships or financial assistance programs that it deems necessary, including but not limited to the Regent scholarships, the Reserve Officer Training Corps, the Marine Lab Graduate Assistance Program, and early high school admissions programs. So we just listed those in there so that to remind, those were the ones that were taken out from B, put into D instead. Subsection E is to protect those who have already been awarded scholarships, and it says that nothing in this section shall affect any multi-year scholarship awarded prior to enactment of this act. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does any of my colleagues like to speak to this amendment? Senator Amanda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the mover of this amendment for considering these changes, for us to continue to prioritize other scholarships at the University of Guam that are not necessarily statutory scholarships, such as the very popular Regent Scholarship, the Marine Lab Graduate Assistance Program, and others. These are important scholarships to the university that really help with retention. These are scholarships that go to very hardworking students, and we know that it helps them to complete their college education and eventually enter into the workforce. So I appreciate this language to allow us to continue using the scholarship funds for these as well, in addition to our priorities such as Pro-Tech and health professions training scholarships. And I want to note that letter E was a very important part of this addition because many of these students are already in multi-year scholarships. They have been awarded these scholarships, and they are banking on these to help them complete their college education. So they are in programs that are, they are being funded in programs for more than one academic year, but they are being funded with scholarships to help them complete the entirety of their program. So I appreciate that, and I do have one amendment to make to this amendment.
All right, Senator Shelton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and that is to include what was previously removed from the amendment, which is the program administration, to provide for program administration to be added back into this amendment. So no more than 10% of the total appropriation in this section shall be used for the administration of these programs. And I know that 10% total of $3 million to scholarships and training programs at the University of Guam does seem like a big chunk of money, and I can tell you that this program administration funds a number of salaries at UOG that are critical to student success. They are positions that provide student support and services, and they administer these scholarship and financial aid programs. In addition, these are individuals that also help to recoup funds for the university in the event that a student does not fulfill all of the obligations of their scholarships. They may fall off track and have to return some money. These are the folks who help to recoup those costs and keep the money at the University of Guam. So I think these are critical positions that we should continue to fund, and we won't be able to administer these programs. We won't be able to divvy out the scholarships if we don't have the folks in place to do that job. So I ask my colleagues to please consider this, keeping this part of the section intact.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Does any of the colleagues would like to speak to that amendment, to the amendment? Basically, just leaving what was striked out, that no more than 10% of the total appropriation in this section shall be used for the administration of this program. That's basically what it is. Just restored that. Huh? Senator Tello, you wanted to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is the amendment to the amendment.
Yes.
Placing back the 10%. Mr. Chair, if you do the math on this, it's about $306,000 that's coming from these scholarships that are placed in these areas. I mean,
Okay.
it's a lot of 306,000. That's quite a big chunk of change, you know, especially when you have students who can utilize this funding. And I think that was the intent in the first place, to use every dime of this toward that. We already know that by time halfway through, not even halfway through the year, the $3 million is already gone. This could help at least 3 or 4 students in funding scholarships. And that's the whole intent of this. We've heard so many times how short they are already. I mean, Mr. Chair, there was a bill that was repealed that I thought was a great idea, to use the Pell Grant for a lot of these students, especially on the merit scholarships, where they can use a Pell Grant. And that's federal money that can be utilized first. I mean, that's a huge chunk of change. But unfortunately, that law was repealed, and now forces the merit scholarship individuals to utilize this funding. That's local funding, only $3 million. And if you look how much it costs for the merit scholarship, Mr. Chair, I think it was about $2 million. That only leaves very little left for the other scholarship programs, the ProTech, and the ones that are left in here. So, Mr. Chair, I object to that amendment.
All right.
And I object because this can fund, this is able to fund additional students looking to get that scholarship. And like I said, Mr. Chair, if you look at how much money is used for the merit scholarship, what is left over is very little. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tardivi. Does anyone else like to speak to the amendment? No one? There is an objection? So all in favor of the amendment? Or you can close, ma'am. Apologize. Ambulai, Senator Nelson, you may speak on to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to some questions for the sponsor and perhaps maybe OFB, if they can chime in. what this amount, is that accurate that it's $304,000?
Can you repeat your question again, Senator?
The previous speaker, my colleague, was saying that it was $304,000 is the amount of the 10%. Is that accurate?
Based on the amendment to the amendment, it's my understanding that that amendment wants to take 10% of the total for administrative costs.
That's correct.
If you take 10% of 3 million,
Oh, okay, so,
six,
okay,
that's how she comes up with the $306,000.
300. Okay, yeah, so I was thinking, because I heard 304,000, but it's actually 306,000, right? Of the 10, which is 10%.
306.
So how is this money dispersed if we take away the administrative costs? Are these job placements for people that are currently working at UOG? Is that their job? Are they, I don't know, are classified positions, tenured positions that disperse this amount? How will it impact that?
Yeah, my understanding of the program is that there is administrative staff already running this program. Well, it's coming out of their general operation, which I assume it is. So there are actually people, employees set aside that they actually monitor these scholarship programs. If the amendment, though I am reading it correctly, is to augment those people doing it or to hire more people to actually administer and run these programs, and so be it. But technically, when you run programs, if it's multiple programs and the intent is to at least allocate an administrative cost from all sorts of fundings, then I would, maybe highly recommend that you put an amount, say 10% of every funding source to be put in a pot, and that pot basically pays the operation of the programs.
Okay, and so this 306,000, is that, right now, is that being utilized for people who are sitting in these jobs to administer these funds?
The answer is no, Senator, because the entire $3 million is going for the scholarship program right now. I believe the intent of the amendment is to set aside 10% of that amount for administrative costs.
So there's no warm bodies there right now operating? Are there warm bodies right now administering these costs? Are there jobs in this place right now administering these costs?
My understanding is the University of Guam is administering scholarship programs, so I believe there are people there running the program. Yes.
Okay, so is this money being used for those people operating the program?
Not the 300,000 that she's referring to, because it's part of the scholarship. It's not for admin costs.
So on top of the admin costs, they're getting an additional $306,000 for vacant positions.
Well, the way the law reads right now, portion of the appropriation includes administrative costs. So I would safely say to some degree, yes, they are paying administrative costs. But I believe the amendment to the amendment is to set aside 10% and a specific amount to set aside. You have to augment, I guess, the current program administrative costs.
So then may I ask the sponsor to explain exactly this 10%? Is this actually people now that are performing the administrative duties for the programs for the sponsor?
Do you yield to the question, Senator Shelton?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, this amendment is to restore the language of
Yes.
including the program administration and the cost of that program administration at 10% of the total SFAP funding. This is the language from the previous year's budget. It is historically included in the budget in the SFAP section of the University of Guam's budget. Currently, the University of Guam is using the 10% of the scholarship and financial aid portion to fund 6 staff members who are tasked with providing student support and services and administering these programs, these different scholarship and financial aid programs, as well as I mentioned before, recouping funds of scholarships that were not complied with. So these are, in fact, warm bodies at the University of Guam being funded through an administrative cost that we gave to the SFAP in previous budgets, in last year specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I wanted to clarify, if there are actually people in these positions, and now that we know that there are people in these positions, then I strongly support this amendment.
Point of
Thank you,
inquiry,
Senator
Mr. Chair.
Nelson.
Point of inquiry.
Senator Tello,
Yeah.
what, you have a point of
Just
what?
Inquiry.
Inquiry?
About the, yeah.
Okay,
It mentioned earlier that there are 6 individuals that are being funded by this money, which is about $306,000 that was estimated. And are we sure that these 6 individuals are being funded by this funding, this exact 10%? Because if this goes down in any way, are we losing those 6 people? I mean, if you look at the staffing pattern, are they strictly for this scholarship program? Or are they in a position where they do other work within the within UOG? Number 2, is it coming from the administrative costs of the University of Guam, and not particularly, like Steve was saying, not particularly from this appropriation or set aside?
okay, we'll have Steve clarify, and then we'll move on.
Yes, Senator Tello, as Senator Shelton said, that there are currently bodies employed at the University of Guam to administer the scholarship program. The law right now, as it seemed, as proposed, it says no more than 10%. So if it's 10% they're using, then 10% of the total that's being appropriated is going to be set aside for administrative costs. It could be 5, it could be 8, but the bill says no more than 10. So we take the max when we consider things like this.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero.
That's not answering my question. I'm asking, are these individuals funded through the administrative costs and not by this set aside from the University of Guam? Are they employees of the University of Guam? In other words, if this funding was not available, those individuals will still be employed.
That's your assumption. Mr. Guerrero, if you can answer that question?
I would have to look at the staffing pattern right now for ULG to see whether or not these 6 individuals that have been noted are specifically assigned to the scholarship program.
I'd like that, Mr. Chair, if we can take a short recess to find out for sure, because this is laying way heavy on this particular amendment.
All right, we'll take a short recess. My colleagues, Committee of the Whole is called back to order. You had a question?
Yes, Mr.
Did you
Chair.
receive a response during the recess?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and
Okay.
I'd like Steve to go ahead and, well, basically, I was told that these areas, the money is used for those individuals sitting there, but Mr. Chair, just because one person is sitting in that position doesn't mean that's the only thing they do at the University of Guam. They probably do multiple other tasks available, so that needs to be done. And considering with all the art funding that's coming in and all the additional grants that are coming in, Mr. Chair, I think the University of Guam could shoulder this cost if there's any, and I don't think they're going to let anybody go, considering the funding that they're getting federally.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I still stand in objection.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other colleague would like to speak to this amendment? None? There is an objection. All in favor of this amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, no? 7? Oh, wait. Senator Sabina, all in favor of this amendment? Please raise your hand. Senator Ada, just want to see if. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, 8. Motion passes. Now we will proceed back to Senator. Okay, we got the 8. Okay, we'll now move back to the. Does anyone want to speak to the amendment as amended? There being none, is there an objection? I think I heard earlier, but it was a previous amendment. Is there amendment to the amendment? The amendment that has been amended? Huh? Okay. Okay. Are you done? You're done, right? Okay. So, does anyone would like to speak on the amendment as amended? There being none, are there any objection? There being none, amendment passes. We will now proceed to the next amendment. And if I'm correct, we'll move to Senator Brown. You have an amendment. And it should say SB 55 JBL4 P24 S5. Okay? Can everybody see that? You might want to refresh your. It's SB 55 JB L4 P24 S5. JB, name for Senator Brown. Ma'am?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I put forth this amendment, Mr. Chairman, after reviewing the current amounts in the budget bill with regards to funding the monitoring program and the hydrogeologic survey at the University of Guam. I did discuss this matter with Weary and Dr. Jensen, who oversees this program. The existing language with regards to funding, because there are two programs. One is, as I mentioned, is the hydrogeologic survey. The second one, of course, is the monitoring program that the University of Guam partners with USGS. And certainly for our first one, let me just get my amendments here in order. In discussions with Weary, they had submitted to the legislature their request earlier this year for a collective appropriation for the hydrogeologic survey of $398,959. So the existing language in the bill right now that has $159,956 is currently inadequate to fund the program. It barely covers 40% of their current requirements. Most of the work that's actually done under this program, and this program, Mr. Chairman, was created in the 24th Guam Legislature, primarily to address what we had a void in here on Guam, and that's actually taking the technical expertise we had at the university and putting a practical application to ensure that we not only were able to educate and have students degreed in hydrogeologic study, but also to address how we can profile, understand, and manage the northern Guam waterlands, even though, of course, they also address surface water issues. But as you know, with our growth and development on the island, there's major concern that we have with regards to how effectively we are managing the northern Guam waterlands. And of course, pretty much all that we have, while there's many things certainly we are appropriating funding in the budget, I think we can all agree that something's very critical and very necessary to our very existence is water. The fact that we're able to support the current population that we have, the fact that we're able to support the current military population that we have, and certainly prior to this pandemic, and hopefully as things improve in the future, the million-plus tourists that are sustained on this island during their visit is all related to the amount of water and the quality of water that we're able to provide to our community. So while I understand there are important things that are funded in this budget, I think we can all agree water is a very it's necessary. It's absolutely necessary to our existence. And more importantly, having individuals within our very community that are educated in this field is even more critical. And while we argue there's other positions also that are needed, from education to healthcare, these experts that we are homegrown, essentially having homegrown, is very, very important. I mean, out of the 70-plus students that have received environmental degrees, 40 of them have been sponsored by WERI. 25 of them still live on Guam, work on Guam, or teach on Guam. And so to enable them to actually execute the requirements that they have under their program in what was originally mandated by the original legislation in the 24th Guam Legislature, I would like to include this additional funding of $239,003 so that we can adequately fund the program as submitted to the legislature by WERI for this fiscal year. With that, Mr. Chairman, I certainly hope to get the support of my colleagues on this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Does any of my colleagues would like to speak to this amendment? I see Senator Paris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in full support of this amendment. I think over the years, WERI has been slowly, diminished. There's been diminished appropriations to WERI, and they've actually, as far as I can tell, they really maximize and leverage their funds through internships. And these internships can lead to careers that are much needed in our government. Specifically, like Guam EPA could really benefit from this. And I think, it's a good investment to ensure that our aquifer is being monitored and protected. So I rise in full support.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Does anyone else like to speak to this amendment? Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, can I just have a quick recess to speak with the sponsor on this amendment?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We are in recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Senator Nelson, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I thank the sponsor for this amendment, and I'm in full support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other colleague who would like to speak to this amendment? Senator Tello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly I think this is money well spent, especially at the University of Guam and the assistance that they need. I know that any time that we needed any kind of information whatsoever, they provided a very thorough report to this body. Whenever we request for information that's needed as well, they come forward in providing us that information without even doing a follow-up. It's there for us. I think there are additional, I'd like to see additional funding going there because there's so much more that we can do to cover these areas. Our environment and research and water, it's vital. We've had some issues in the last legislature, in the prior legislature, when we were talking about things over our aquifer and trying to get that information out to us, to provide us how important it was. But I'm pretty sure we all do know that. But in order to give us this kind of information, it takes funding, it takes research, and it's money well spent. Everybody needs water, clean water. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does any other colleague like to speak to this amendment? If none, Senator Ada?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too am in support of this amendment. I think it's important to know that the water that we drink is pure, is clean. We want to make sure that wherever anyone, where we have our water wells, and they're placed in areas that we know can be very beneficial to our people. And I hope that our colleagues will support this amendment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Does any other colleague like to speak? Senator Pito, would you like to speak? No. Anyone else? No one else? Are there an objection to this amendment? There being none, amendment passes. Senator Brown, you have another amendment. And that's SB 55JBL8P24S6.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is the other half of the funding that would be provided to WERI for monitoring, specifically a partnership that has existed for a number of years between WERI and USGS. WERI has worked again this year for the upcoming fiscal year of 2021-2022 to work in partnership with the U.S. Department of Interior, with USGS, to provide a partnership with them that would include an additional $95,313 that USGS will provide to partner with the University of Guam to do the water resource monitoring program. And primarily the work that they do collectively is to keep track of our water lens in terms of measuring the salinity, measuring levels of contamination, to ensure that we protect our water resources, particularly in northern Guam. Of course, they do also address surface water resource. The existing language that's in the Budget Act does not fully fund the program, because pretty much out of this section, 100% of the funding here that we're requesting, and we are asking for another $28,475, which would increase with the existing language to $164,737. That is actually the full 100% matching that the University of Guam through WERI will provide in their partnership with USGS, and certainly we have a formal letter that was submitted to the legislature notifying us that the USGS would continue to partner with WERI this upcoming year with regards to continuing the water resource monitoring program for Guam. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I certainly hope our colleagues will support this additional funding of $28,475 to add to the existing appropriation that's in the budget bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Does any colleague would like to speak to this amendment? Senator Duenas.
Mr. Chairman, just a short comment. I do support both amendments. I wanted to save it for this and so we can be moving along, but this is definitely, between both of these amendments, very critical. During not only the discussions in this legislature, but in the 35th legislature, in between that time, I had a chance to actually speak to an individual from WERI, and he said, maybe at some point we want to have a briefing once again at the legislature because it's really interesting when we talk about the aquifer and what actually happens in terms of different areas of our island, and even what happens up north to begin with. It's kind of fascinating getting a description of how in certain areas of the north it actually doesn't go particularly to the water lens. It actually seeps and then comes up out of the actually the subterranean, right, on the ocean side. So it was really interesting, and so I thought, but the key thing that the gentleman said to me was monitoring is absolutely key. I mean, regardless of whether it's, going directly into the aquifer that feeds our water system, or the water that actually seeps out through the limestone and out to the ocean. And so I was really fascinated by that discussion. But what I took away from it was not only that it's so dynamic in terms of the island and the aquifer, but also just monitoring is key. That is absolute king in terms of making sure that we're maintaining safe levels and safe drinking water. So I commend my colleague for this and certainly support this amendment. Jesus Masi.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Does anyone else like to speak to this amendment? There being none, are there any objection to this amendment? There being none, amendment passes. We'll move now to the next amendment. Senator Clint Rigel, my colleagues, it's under SB 55 CER L20 P27. P27 is called page 27, Senator Moreland. Thank you. Senator Rigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is to line 20 of page 27 to amend the bill to strike out the word may and replace it with the word shall. So instead, this section will read, the sum of $1,158,283 shall be allocated from the general fund appropriation in section 2 of this part of this chapter to the OG Capital Improvements Fund for the purpose of paying rental payments due under the leaseback agreement pursuant to Public Law 31-22918 as repealed and reenacted by Public Law 31-277. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone, Senator Tello, you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I can, why the change? Can I ask the author of the amendment, please, why the change?
Sure, it's just to ensure that this money goes to capital improvement fund for the purpose of paying rental payment under the leaseback agreement, as opposed to how it's currently written, says may. This just ensures that it shall be allocated there.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you have other areas that have the same language, may be allocated. In fact, section 13, right above it, it says 1.6 may be allocated for, why don't we put shall be allocated? So maybe BBMR can explain to me what's the
Senator
difference.
Tello,
Yes.
if you want to talk about section 13, we can talk about that then.
No, I'm asking.
We are on section 14.
Right.
If we can stick to the section, and then we can move from there. Okay?
Mr. Chair, the question is, compared to this change and versus all the other language in here, is this something that we need to do to all the other areas that have may and change that to shall? So I'm just wanting to know from BBMR, what's the difference?
You mean you want to find out from OFB?
Sorry,
Okay.
thank
OFB.
you for the
Mr.
correction.
Guerrero.
Sorry, OFB.
Okay. Then it'll be
Sorry,
addressed.
Steve, for saying OFB. BBMR. Thank you.
Oh, that's okay. I spent 36 years in BBMR, so I don't blame you. Anyway, Senator, when we put this budget together, there are certain provisions that we allowed in the budget, and we gave up to the discretion of the agencies to figure out how they wanted to utilize their funds. Seems a lot of their agents, we've already set a ceiling for them. So what we did is we went ahead and went through their requests and gave them that opportunity to decide for themselves on a priority listing which programs they would want to tackle and which programs they may want to maybe just put aside. It's the priority was really up to the agency to do it. Well, we gave them that flexibility to do it within the ceiling that we gave them.
Okay. Now let's move. Does anyone else, Senator Tello?
No, thank you for answering that question, Steve. Appreciate it.
All right. Does anyone else like to speak? Senator Piru Terlai.
Mr. Chair, I just want to acknowledge that I rise in support of this amendment. This amendment is nothing more than just affirming the guarantee that the money is there and that it would not be taken away for any other purpose. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to speak to this amendment? I see, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, I'm trying to, as fast as I can. This section is it says to allocate and shall be allocated from the general fund appropriation to UOG. Yes, for the purpose of paying rental payments due under the leaseback agreement pursuant to Public Law 31229 and reenacted by 31277. What project is this for? This is the brand new, this was not in last year's budget, as far as I can tell. So what is this now paying leaseback payments, rental payments for?
It's the engineer grant.
The building's not done yet, is it?
I know they did do a groundbreaking because I was there when I was the oversight for
Yeah,
UOG.
but I've been there, it's not done. Is this for the engineering building? What is this for?
It's for the Engineering and Student Center.
And the student center?
Yes.
Okay, so if you could take a look at, on page 25, section 10, there's an appropriation again for $500,000, again to the Capital Improvements Fund, UOG Capital Improvements Fund, same fund. This one is from the Guam Educational Facilities Fund, not the general fund. So we're taking two funding sources, funding UOG capital improvements. This one is on section 10 for the purpose of paying debt service. What facilities was that for? This 500,000.
What, we want to take a recess to reconfirm?
No. Senator, the 500,000 basically is the payment for the the business building, the Leangorel building.
Okay,
The
so this is not
500,000.
the 500,000 that we put in there that used to come from the highway fund, and then we stopped that and made it come out of, this is not that? I thought that was for their new engineering and student center. It used to be out of the highway fund, then we stopped taking it.
This is the 500,000, Senator, we've been appropriating at least for the last several years.
Yes,
And this is the one that goes on for 40 years.
so you think this is all for SBPA building?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right, and so this is a new 1.158 million that we're going to allocate from the general fund for the UOG capital improvements lease back. Is this actually, due? If it's a lease back, that means the building's done and we're leasing it back. But the student center's not been built, neither has the engineering building. Can we put this off until FY23? Or I guess it doesn't matter because it says it shall be, may be allocated, shall be, but I just want to know the status of this leaseback agreement.
I believe, Senator, this is one of the conditions we had to put in place in order for us to receive, I think, federal funding.
What federal funding?
For the engineering.
Okay, so this is a promise from the legislature now for every budget going forward for UOG that we're going to pay 1.158 million. Normally, that comes in a bill by itself.
My understanding, Senator, is they were trying to negotiate this thing last year, but they ran into some problems, and now they're just delaying it and want to do it in FY22. So this is the amount they're saying that they need to set aside in order to secure that federal grant.
Right. This is, it looks like though it's going to be a continuing obligation on our part prior to.
I'm assuming there is going to be some obligation on the local side. The amount, I'm not too sure if it's going to be the same every year.
Can you just confirm which federal funding is going to be utilized for this? Are you talking about, you're trying to meet a USDA grant match or something like that?
I can get back to you, Senator, on that. Let me
All
just
right.
confirm.
Okay, otherwise I have no objection to the amendment from may to shall be allocated. I hope that they need it, otherwise they're tying up their hands from using this money.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else like to speak to the amendment? There being none, are there any objection to the amendment? There being none, amendment passes. My colleagues, it's 4:25, and we have a public hearing coming up at 5. I think, why don't we take a quick recess and then we can talk about that. Thank you. The committee of the whole is called back to order. My colleagues, we will be recessing, but first, Senator Amanda is going to announce the schedule to finish up the budget hearing. But we'll be recessing because there is a public hearing at 5. Madam Speaker?
Can we just finish UOG though, until 5?
There's a transition period where they have, the system's got to change. It's not a quick turn off and then turn back on. So why don't we just go ahead and continue on? Senator Amanda, you have something to announce?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to share some information for all of the viewers following along with us in this budget process. Tomorrow, we hope to resume session at 8:30 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. when we will break for lunch and come back 11:30 a.m. and come back at 12:30 p.m. We will then break at 5 o'clock p.m. for a scheduled roundtable hearing, come back at 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, return Thursday morning at 8:30 a.m., break for lunch at 11:30 a.m., return at 12:30 p.m., break again at 5 o'clock p.m. for another scheduled roundtable hearing, come back at 7 p.m. and break for the night at 9 p.m. We will return on Friday morning, again at 8:30 a.m., break again at 11:30 a.m. for lunch until 12:30 p.m., break again at 5 p.m. for a scheduled informational hearing, return at 7 p.m. and break for the night at 9 p.m. And if needed on Saturday, we plan to be in session from 8:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m.
Object.
It's not a motion, Mr. Chair.
All right,
It's an
this is
announcement.
information. Okay, my colleagues, you've got the schedule. We'll work with it, and we'll see how we can do it. All right, that being said, we will now recess because the system people, my ladies, no yelling across the hall, please. Thank you. We'll recess at this time till tomorrow morning, 8:30. I will gavel in at 8:30, so I hope to see a quorum at 8:30 tomorrow morning.